Welcome back, everyone, to theCUBE studios here in Palo Alto, California. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE with Dave Vellante, my co-host. We're here for 3 days of wall-to-wall coverage on robotics and AI leaders. We have a leader here in the industry, Diane Bryant, who's an independent director at Broadcom, Celestial AI, a bunch of other firms. 32 years at Intel, running 99% of the server market at that time. Great to have you on. You've been a leader, you're leading companies now at the board level, so thanks for coming on, I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, it's a lot of fun.
So
nice
the big conversation is chips, software, geography. That seems to be the theme. Sovereign clouds come up, countries are looking at creating data centers for competitive advantage, but the action at the semiconductor level is very hot right now, and obviously software and hardware working together. This is your wheelhouse, you've been in this industry. What's your take right now? Because like there's innovation going on, it's global, the supply chain challenges. What's your assessment of where we are with the AI wave pushing the demand curve?
Well, I mean, my goodness, you can't go anywhere today without talking about AI. I will start by saying every technology takes 10 years to get to adoption. And there's so many proof points of that. For instance, I created the silicon photonics, the optical interconnect business at Intel, was 2015. And now, 2025, 10 years later, demand for optics, explosion, everyone is moving their infrastructure and compute to optical because you could only run electrons over copper at such speed, and then it'll fall apart. So, so what is fun about AI, from my perspective, just my background, is that the entire value chain. So you can start by saying, you know, AI and all the wonderful things it can give enterprise and consumers, but then you back it up and say, okay, well, if you're going to have AI, then you need massive amounts of compute, you need massive amounts of storage, you need incredibly high bandwidth, fast interconnect optics. Yeah, then you back it up and say, okay, now you need custom GPUs, because you know the world can't rely on NVIDIA, and as wonderful, well, Jensen's genius, but as wonderful as NVIDIA is, people need choice, right? You're never going to get locked in, and so now you have these hyperscale solutions that are all inventing their own accelerator solutions, and which goes to the Broadcom board. Obviously, Broadcom is doing very, very well in the AI.
We had Vijay on earlier. He's now doing sales marketing strategy for the chips. They just Tomahawk 6 just launched.
Yeah.
Good performance.
Oh, excellent performance. Don't say good.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is excellent. And people missed Broadcom. We didn't, because I mean we kind of understood it, I think, pretty well. Missed in terms of the number two. Sometimes you could even argue number one AI company, because the stuff they do is so hard.
Well, and that's the point. The stuff they do is so hard. Well, AI is very hard, right? Whether you're talking about the algorithms, you're talking about building the data models and cleansing the data in order to run the algorithms, and then the compute to run on it. And because it is so complex, only the really big, highly talented companies can do it. And that's why you see, you know, Google was the first to have a custom TPU, and Amazon and Meta, everyone, right? It's complex, and then the beneficiary of all of that is Broadcom.
Yeah, Diane, one of the things Dave and I always talk about, because we're kind of historians, because we're old, but we always talk about this waves of technology. So the AI wave gets compared to the internet. We say it's the PC era combined with the internet times 100, because it's got a lot of change to it. But the PC era that we lived through and you drove had processor improvement. Moore's law was kicking in. I remember the original processor, the 286, 386, 486.
I was the 486. 486. I started Intel on the 486.
I think that created the server.
I did the I/O buffer.
That was a steep part of the S-curve right there.
That made the server market happen. I remember I was working at HP at the time, but every innovation had better Windows and better server software. So the software was matching pace with the hardware at that era. We're kind of seeing a similar parallel now. You got NVIDIA and all the chips coming out. As it gets better, the software gets better. So that kind of relationship flywheel kind of is consistent.
Yeah.
As someone who's lived through that era, and then you put the internet and mobile and everything in cloud on there, we're kind of seeing new stuff come out. How should companies be thinking about this? Is it backwards compatibility? Is it ride the software wave? Because you have that software hardware dynamic going on. What's your feeling on this? Because you've lived through that. You're seeing kind of almost the same movie.
Yeah, it's absolutely a flywheel. When the first time I got up on stage and said the words artificial intelligence was 2013. And it was because we now had the cloud. And so now all of a sudden you have the infinite, the cloud, infinite compute and storage to now run all of these algorithms in these incredibly large databases. AI was invented in the 50s, right? And it was sci-fi, right? Because you didn't have the compute and the storage to actually do it. It was conceptual, but you didn't have the infrastructure to run it. And so I had a GPU, Xeon Phi. Unfortunately, it's no longer at Intel, and they think of today if there was Intel Xeon Phi. But anyway, we launched Xeon Phi, and so now you have the compute power, like the GPUs. And we debated, how are we going to launch this thing? Because at the time, the only solution out there was Watson. The first solution was Watson in 2011, and IBM called it cognitive computing.
Right.
So we said, well, we can't call it cognitive computing. Why would we help IBM and bolster their brand? We can't call it artificial intelligence because everyone thinks of that as sci-fi crazy. Yeah, and so the marketing team at Intel struggled and struggled and struggled, and we just said, forget it. Let's just call it artificial intelligence. And got up on stage, Google Cloud, Diane Bryant came on stage, and we talked about artificial intelligence is real. So, but that was 2013.
Yeah, and now fast forward today.
And now here we are. So it's that decade, I always say this, 10 years. It always takes 10 years from when technology is viable, feasible, available, to when it is truly adopted at a level that you can, and it was,
If you can go back and do if you can go back and do a replay at that time, what would you have done differently at Intel if you had the powers to say, hey, knowing what you know now, what could have happened? Because I know Intel, a lot of stuff spun out of Intel, a lot of people had started companies, so Intel was directionally on path for this.
Yeah, a lot of things, we look back at Intel, a great company, an incredible technical leadership, and a lot of times we were just ahead of the market, and then as Andy Grove would tell us, you gotta have the persistency and the courage to just stick with it. And the market will follow because adoption of technology is hard. So Xeon Phi, I launched in 2013. So we had our GPU. First year it was launched, we had 10 of the top 10 supercomputers running not on NVIDIA but on Xeon Phi. And then we created OmniPath, the interconnect for it, so high-speed interconnect. And then I left, and the good news is OmniPath survived. I'm very, very proud. Lisa Spellman is a good friend of mine. She's now leading Cornelis. And, and thank goodness they convinced Intel to not destroy the value and destroy the product line, but allow it to live outside of Intel.
So as John said,
that's great news.
We're kind of historians. We've seen all the waves. History repeats itself. It sort of echoes.
Yeah.
So IBM, of course, has famously inadvertently handed its power to Microsoft and Intel, known as Wintel, of course. And now we're seeing NVIDIA, the rise of NVIDIA. They had the hyperscales come in, of course. NVIDIA's like Win Intel with CUDA. How do you see that playing out? Obviously Broadcom has found a way to compete, with networking and custom silicon and open, scalable, and power OSP.
Well, so I'm a historian too. I may be older than you. But yes, exactly that. When we launched Xeon Phi, so if I just go back in time for a second, when we launched Xeon Phi, it was immediately adopted by who? High-performance computing, scientific computing, people that own the entire software stack. They own that stack. So they're not beholden to CUDA and NVIDIA. They can port their stack over. They own the whole thing. So it's not the Wintel lock, right? And that's what you saw. So now, fast forward, and the hyperscalers, how quickly could they move off of NVIDIA? Because they own their software stack, right? And so you see the hyperscalers then being able to instantly, over 10 years, but instantly develop their own accelerator, their own GPU or TPU or XPU, whatever you want to call it, because they own the software stack. That is always a lock. You're absolutely right. Hardware to software lock. But if you own your software stack, you port it and you move to the best solution. Enterprise, I was CIO of Intel for 4 years, ran IT. That was probably one of my best jobs, I have to say. I didn't want the job. I was telling Ottolini please no, because I was running the server business at the time. And he goes,
99%
go be
market
CIO.
share.
And I was like, I don't want to be CIO. But it really was the best job because we had to eat our own dog food. We had to.
You were customer zero.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I launched our first cloud in 2011. So this is another 10-year, I'm kind of probably jumping around and you want to take over here, but
No, it's good. No, it's all good.
It was 2006, right, when Google announced the word cloud. Remember? Hopefully you remember.
Yeah.
And it was 2006 that Andy Jassy launched AWS, right? In 2011, we were all trying to get enterprise to adopt cloud computing, right? Because this was the big unleashing of infinite capacity. And so I thought, oh, I'm the CIO, I better deploy a cloud. And I think I was the first enterprise in the world, certainly Fortune 100 company, to deploy a cloud to prove the technology. Intel is running on a cloud, private cloud, on-prem with VMware and with Linux. We did 2 clouds. But that was 2011, right? And still in 2016, if you said the word cloud, there was a survey done actually. If you said the word cloud, if you said to someone, where's cloud computing, where's your data stored, they'd all look up the cloud, right? Now, enterprise is actually deploying private clouds because now it's kind of a commodity. Like, yeah, cloud computing, you just deploy it.
It's an experience.
That was a decade. That was a decade later, and that benefits
So
Broadcom. But that benefits Broadcom, VMware.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, but let's
Huge.
explain that.
Back to Broadcom.
Because, well, a couple things. One is AI is moving to the data, and there's a lot of data on-prem.
Yes.
Number one. Number two is when the cloud first came out, it actually was less expensive, you know, and because of the overhead of the human labor. But that's gone away because you can get the same experience, substantially the same experience that I'm sure you found this when you built your own cloud with all the automation and the deployment and the one click.
I mean, the value, it goes back to Jevon's paradox, right? Anytime you can make something more efficient, you're going to drive demand for it. And I remember talking about VMware and virtualization of servers, and the investor, you know, the Wall Street guys were like, you'll never sell another server again because they're just going to keep loading the apps onto the same server. And it's like, oh, you guys are crazy. Now it's so much faster and easier to deploy
They'll buy
apps.
more servers.
Demand goes through the roof, right?
Absolutely.
Utilization goes from 2% to 80%. You can run a server at 80% utilization now with the cloud, thanks to the cloud.
And let's do more.
And then you just keep buying more. So, so absolutely private cloud. It used to be very expensive to run your own data centers. When I was CIO, we had 400 data centers, very expensive. Now you can run, you don't have to run those data centers at 2% utilization. You can now move to the cloud, run them at 80% utilization, and your costs go way down.
Right. Yeah,
way
Diane,
down.
we were at Mobile World Congress past 4 years with theCUBE. 2 years ago, Charlie Kawaz came on. He was talking about the chips, and they was coming out with all that new stuff. This year, they didn't have a financial analyst meeting. This year, he didn't come on because he was doing meetings. We had a lot of meetings with operators, and sovereignty private cloud is coming. So we're seeing another potential wave of private cloud on country. So this is a big deal. Broadcom, I think, will participate in it with VMware because VMware Cloud Foundation is essentially an on-prem cloud.
That's what it is.
So,
it's a private cloud. It's on-prem cloud. You know, the sovereign data center thing is another part of AI that is very exciting, which is that value chain, right? So you have to at some point have a data center, right? So you're building okay, now you need to power the data center. So you see the explosion in the market around power solutions, right? Nuclear solutions are back. You have to have the land. I mean, so the value chain, in order to make AI happen, there is a tremendous value chain that needs to be created all the way down to the physical building being powered and cooled. And when I was at Google, right, we built that huge data center in Iowa, and these things are not simple. It's not like your living room. It's not like a living room to plug in the server. I mean, they're very complex. And so you just see, it's fabulous to watch the growth in everything along that value chain. And colo data centers, I mean, we looked at that when I was at Google of, do we just keep building data centers all around the world, or is it better to let someone else do that? And you see a lot of data center companies sprouting out now that are responsible for the physical, and then you plop your server down in their data center instead of having to build
We're
your
very
own.
We had
bullish.
Crusoe on, Chase Lockmiller and others, sort of CoreWeave and those guys.
No.
I'll share some numbers with you. The data center business, when you think about the hardware, the cooling, the power, it was perpetually about a $200 or $220 billion business. It was kind of flatline, went up some years, went down some years. Last year, it went from $222 billion to $350 billion. 60% growth in 1 year. I mean, it's a flat business for decades, and that just went boom through the roof. And it's going to continue to grow.
10-year wave hit.
It'll be a trillion. There's your 10-year wave. It'll be a trillion in 10 years.
There's the 10-year. Absolutely. I mean, you look at just the compute market for AI is projected to be between 300 billion and 500 billion in 2030, which just the compute, the hardware, the physical. And so this goes to your point, is there room for everybody? My goodness, if you have a pie that's 500 billion, of course there's room for, NVIDIA and AMD and the custom GPUs and, that just
it's not a zero sum.
It's not a zero sum game.
NVIDIA might get 20% of it, whatever. There's like 80% left over for everybody else.
Yeah, there's room for InfiniBand, Interconnect, OmniPath from Lisa, Ultra, Ethernet, optical, there's room for all
Now,
this.
they might not get
huge.
the operating margins that you were used to when you were at Intel.
Oh, I don't know. Technology's not easy. It's,
Broadcom,
I don't know.
Broadcom will, because they've got a differentiated model.
They have a differentiated model, and they
Not
have
sure AMD will.
They have I think it's about leadership. Hock Tan is brilliant. He's probably the most brilliant businessman I've ever worked with.
Very impressive.
He is, software, you should be getting 90. You should be getting 90% margin on software, and if you're not, you got a problem. And he took VMware, the fact that it was allowed to run at such ridiculously low margins for a software company, he took it and he's a genius.
And he doesn't have to pay the cloud cogs. He doesn't have to pay the time. I mean, software companies today, SaaS companies are running at a mid-70s gross margin. And he's right. Software companies supposed to run at 90%.
Hock's got a problem. His margins are too high. He's going to have to go back to Wall Street. Why am I doing 89% margin?
What's that?
His margins have gone up with VMware because of the performance numbers I've been hearing in the Valley, roughly speaking, is their biggest profit gain, I think, was like 5-6 billion before the acquisition. Now it's way over 10 billion in profit, give or take. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's in that. It's different. It's almost double.
Well, and there's an even more fundamental reason for that, which is when the cloud, back to when the cloud was invented. When the cloud was invented, you had all these software companies that went to a SaaS model, right? And you start delivering so when I was CIO, we bought an enterprise license agreement, right? And we got Microsoft deployed, and then we paid a support and service contract over X number of years. When the cloud came along, the software model flipped and it all went SaaS. You no longer owned the license. You now paid a subscription, ratable income, recurring revenue, which is a beautiful business model.
Lifetime value is
Lifetime is crazy. For some reason, VMware never flipped. For some reason, until Hock Tan came in and took over, it was still an enterprise license agreement with a support and service. Absurd in 2025.
Yeah.
I think it was because they were governed by a storage company.
No,
I
no.
do. Yes, I do. I think I think EMC. I love Joe Tucci. We love Joe. We know him well. He's a great executive, but he doesn't. Not a software mindset.
How long ago did it spin out, though, of EMC?
Well, he took it over in 2009.
And it became an independent. VMware became an independent company run by.
No, it was still a controlled company. It was still a controlled company. They had the little puppet masters. They wouldn't let them spin out vSAN. They wouldn't let them be aggressive there.
I think you're crazy.
I think I'm off base.
It was being led by a CEO named.
Okay.
And
Michael Dell?
No, Pat.
Pat.
Joe Tucci couldn't stand up to Pat and say, "This is how we're going to run this company." And Pat won, and that's why you got basically a low-margin software business. But it was great for EMC.
Wait, so who are you pointing to for not converting over to a modern?
Pat Gelsinger.
Oh, okay, now we're on the same page.
No, because Pat was more forceful than Joe, and Joe was like, it's adding to our income statement. We're a storage company. We're under pressure. It's
he got it for a song.
It's helping our margin. So it took EMC from good to a little bit better. Now Hock has taken that from.
Well, Hock, they thought it was a cash cow.
But Pat could have, in all those years he was CEO, that was the time when software was moving to a SaaS subscription model. It didn't happen.
Hardware
And
guy.
Hawk saw it, had the vision, saw the opportunity, and in 2 years,
It's a nice cyclical business too, because when chips change,
Magic.
You know who a hardware person that actually became a really good software CEO is Frank Slootman. He ran Data Domain, if you remember those guys, hardware boxes to do backup, and he ran ServiceNow and Snowflake, high margin software businesses.
I mean,
It can happen.
the Broadcom business model.
That's right. Chip guy, right? Running a software.
I mean, VMware and
he has a hardware, chip and software businesses. Both of them are on fire.
It's the business acumen that you talked to earlier. Just really.
Yes,
on the focus on Hock Tan.
visionary.
Hock Tan's got chips and he's got software.
Yeah.
Software's booming, chips are booming, but it's cyclical. Software could be up, chips could be down, chips could be up, software is it all growing? I mean, is it traditionally cyclical?
Software is, this is the point of subscription model, is then software isn't cyclical. You know every quarter what's coming in, right? And
smooths out the lumps.
It's a beautiful business, yeah. But yes, you're right. So two different businesses growing at a tremendous
Okay, Diane,
level.
you're on a bunch of boards. We love
Yes.
can talk for hours on the history and all of your experiences, because they do relate to AI. But now that you're on boards, you are advising and also have a hand in mentoring younger companies and also companies that are in the growth mode.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unknowns coming. What do you do most of the time? How do you spend your time? Negotiating deals, advising the management team. What's the focus? Obviously, Broadcom's doing great. That's a great company to be on. So, what's the day-to-day operations like for you?
Yeah, so it's a good point. The board position, there's no two boards that are the same. What I have learned, every board is different, and certainly public board, director of public boards, and startup private boards. You can't find anything in common with them. There is absolutely nothing in common, other than you have a quarterly meeting, you have an audit committee, and you write minutes to make sure you all stay legal. But there's nothing in common. And when you have a company that is operating as well as Broadcom, as a board member, it's not a hard job. I'll say that. I hope Hawk doesn't cut my pay, but it's not a hard job.
They're doing good.
They're doing good.
Don't change paths. Stay on the course.
I've also been on a public board, very large public board, that we had an activist, and we broke up the company, United Technologies, and broke it up into Raytheon, Otis Elevators, and HVAC, Carrier HVAC. That's an event as a board member that's very intense, and nobody wants an activist walking through the door, right? So, and then Haemonetics, it's a mid-cap company, it's a med tech company, and they're evolving to be more tech-centric, which is part of the reason I joined. But then you go to the startup land, and I'm
That's fun.
super. Oh my goodness, there's something every day going on, and as a old woman, you can contribute quite a bit to it.
You have wisdom.
We have a lot of experience. So Celestial AI.
Is it fun, or is it like more of a playground environment for you? I mean, because it is dynamic, so it could be
Very dynamic.
high velocity, but is it fun?
Oh, it's a hoot. It's a hoot. It's so fun. Well, look at Celestial AI. So, again, optical interconnect. On fire,
love those
right?
guys, yeah.
Everybody needs to move to optics. And 10-year progression, right? I created Intel Silicon Photonics business in 2015. Now it's 2025 plus 10 years. And you have companies like Celestial AI that are on fire. They've done a magical thing in allowing people to move to optics. So step one, you move to optics as a co-packaged solution.
Right.
Step two, get it closer to the GPU, to the TPU, to the XPU, right? And you get that much more benefit from it. So they have the magic of full integration, tight integration with the accelerator chips. It's fabulous.
Reliability kicks in. I mean, this is great.
Lower power efficiency, performance, everything. And so that's very fun. And you meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. You have the investor community in private boards that you don't have in a public board. So the network, the people you're working with are. I always say that I want to join
Kind of like
a
our
board
event last night.
Huh?
Kind of like our event last night. You get to mingle and have some fun.
We had a lovely event. But when I join a board, I look for boards where It's people that I can learn from, that have a different background and different, because it's an intellectual, you want it to be an intellectual role where I'm learning from you, you're learning from me, because we've lived different experiences.
How much of the discussion pie, if I may, is sort of strategy, numbers, security, AI, and other?
Okay, strategy, numbers.
Security.
Security, in what context?
Like cybersecurity.
Oh.
AI and other.
Well, cybersecurity, get yourself a good CIO and don't think about it. I had a really great CISO when I was CIO, and that's his job, and if we have an attack, he gets fired. Hire and fire, you got to do that as a leader. Okay, but the numbers, of course, the company, like Broadcom, you have to spend a lot of time on the numbers. My goodness, I mean,
supply chain, financial performance.
When you're a publicly traded company, if you can't drill in and know
you're double clicking.
Yeah, you've got to, right? And Hawk's, his original roles were in finance, so he's got those numbers. There's no worry there. But as a board, you're a governance body. I mean, kind of back to the board position. You're governing. You're not operating. You're governing. So your job is to make sure the numbers are all there. The AI. The companies I'm on all have are tech. So AI is everything. It's less than AI. It's all about AI. I guess it's in their name. It's all about AI and the need to move more and more data rapidly. I'm also on the board of mmTron, which is we're just raising the next round if you have any spare money in your pocket. But they are a satellite solution, world records in power amplification. And satellites, there's still 3 billion people in the world that don't have internet access.
Right?
Satellite market is on crazy. I had one investor tell me there's only 2 places I'm investing, AI and SATCOM.
Great stuff.
So mmTron's gonna.
Yeah, and also you don't have the pressure too, the quarterly, as a manager, you have that shot clock if you're at a public company, you're on the board, a little bit less stress.
Well,
or
yes, I mean, depending on the size of the startup. I mean, mmTron is very small, and so, I'm the only board member, so I am the board. But, Celestial AI, sure, we have quarterly meetings and watch the financials. You need to do that still. You want to prepare yourself for one day going IPO. You need to have strong financial governance.
Got
it. It's just so different.
It's great to have you here.
One more question.
Dave's,
I got to go back to Intel. How important is it, public policy, for the U.S. to have onshore advanced manufacturing?
Incredibly important.
Okay.
I mean, so, I'd be an idiot not to say incredibly important.
That's the easy question.
Okay.
How important is it that has to be a U.S. domiciled company? And the reason I ask that is because you have geopolitical threats.
Yeah, it is important, and it's not something that can't be done. So it just should be done. I'm going to say the 10-year again. It's going to be 10 years from the time you break ground on a fab to when you're actually running the first wafers, to when you're in high volume manufacturing and the world is actually, you can see the capacity impact, is 10 years. So you got to get going, you got to get started, but then you need the realism behind it. And I think a lot of the government, CHIPS Act, I think the government doesn't digest just how complex. If it wasn't complex, you would have it today, right? You've got the leading edge is TSMC and Samsung, so of course it's not easy, but you got to get going.
You got to stay on the path.
You got to stay committed. Andy Grove.
But how do you feel about the prospects for having a U.S. domicile company? To me, that can do advanced manufacturing are quite dim right now. Lip-Bu 10, I think, has at least a viable strategy. But it's, in my opinion, I wonder if you could agree or disagree, not a viable strategy to be a number 2 in advanced manufacturing. I think there'll be somewhere in between Global Foundries and Samsung, which has its own set of problems, which are similar but different.
Yes. So number 1, I am so excited that Lip-Bu is leading Intel. I mean, that was just a huge sigh of relief. I was there 32 years.
Yeah.
I was there when Andy Grove was the CEO. Gordon Moore sat down the aisle. I mean, I love that company so much, and to watch it degrade over time was very painful, like losing a child. And so the announcement that Lip-Bu and his willingness to walk in and make it happen, God bless him. He, Intel's tried 5 times to build a foundry in the 32 years that I worked at Intel. 5 times we tried. It's leadership and it's making it a priority. Anything can be done. It's, you know, I mean, come on, look at the invention that happens every day. Intel can have a very successful foundry. How long does it take to, you know, catch up and be leading edge? It's hard. Under the prior CEOs, Intel lost 2 nodes, 2 nodes behind. And if you could leapfrog and all of a sudden jump 2 nodes, well then Moore's law would have been you can double performance every 1 year, which is you can't do it. So it'll take a while. But I will also say, think of how many chips there are in the world. They don't all need leading edge, right? There's a huge.
You could do 6 nanometers on an IoT device.
I agree with that, but we come back to my question: how important is it for a U.S. domicile?
Oh, it is very important
to be at the leading, cutting edge.
Yes, it's very important. But if you don't start, you'll never get there.
Yeah, but my contention, Diane, is the only way to start is if you shed foundry, and structure it in a way that brings in virtually $100 billion in 10 to 12 years. That's my premise.
So I don't agree that you have to break foundry apart from Intel. Look at Hock. He runs a software business, he runs a silicon business, 2 very different things, and he does it magically. There's no reason that Intel can't run a foundry business and can't run a product business and do it well. I just don't think
money and
you
time
need to do that. It's time and talent.
And leadership.
And leadership, absolutely. Focus, prioritization, talent. Intel isn't foundry. We grew up as a custom, we're an IDM. You integrated your manufacturing and design so tightly. Now you need to break it apart and have the talent over in the foundry side. You just need to do it. It's leadership.
While we got you here, I want to ask about Andy Grove, since you brought him up, because we quote him all the time on theCUBE.
Yeah, of course.
One of the books that I read a lot when I graduated business school years ago was High Output Management. Classic book, How to Do Meetings. It was a classic book, and it's a must read. If he was updating that book today for AI, with work from home, with the leadership principles of Andy Grove, I mean, let chaos reign in the chaos. We love these quotes. What would that book look like today? What's high output management today in today's culture? As the speed of the game is fast, leadership first principles, you start to see cultural things.
You know, I think Andy would sit here and say, I'm not changing a damn thing. If you know Andy. I think Andy would say, because you're right, Andy, it was back to basics, back to basics, back to basics, right? And so today, things are moving in even faster. So if you don't have that operational excellence, if you don't have that focus, that prioritization, and just disagree and commit, move, right? Andy's whole thing was just move. The world's moving so fast, you can't afford to sit around and debate.
Argue, complain.
Argue and complain. So I think Andy would say nothing.
It's still relevant today.
He'd be a little mad about
no one uses email. It's called Slack.
Well, he'd be a little mad about Moore's law dying for Intel, not for the industry.
But your point is like
Jensen doesn't even do one-on-ones. Andy would have one-on-ones. He'd had a management discipline.
Who doesn't do one-on-ones?
Jensen said he doesn't do one-on-ones.
No.
Jensen Wong, he said on stage.
His performance reviews are in front of everybody. All his direct reports.
Well,
good luck with that.
I'm like, it's sufficient.
What's real? Yeah.
You know, but I will say, Andy would walk in and say, "There's too many goddamn meetings, right? Too many one-on-ones." So I think Jensen, it's actually smart. Don't sit around in a conference room.
Only the paranoid survive. So he would probably be very paranoid of not missing a node.
Oh, we would have never. Even if Otlini were still alive, we would never.
Yeah.
And so BK dealt the first blow to Intel deadly blow to Intel by killing Moore's law.
Yeah.
That he gets to take that to his tomb.
Ouch.
Yeah.
And then Pat just put Intel on life support, and now Lip-Bu's going to save the day.
Yeah, I think his plan is imminently viable. Pat's was not. And I'm sorry, we wrote about it for years. It's just
Diane, it's great to have you on, and really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and commentary. Congratulations. I love the work you're doing, and again, thanks for coming on theCUBE. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
The leaders are all coming on theCUBE. I'm John Furrier, Dave Vellante, theCUBE, plus the NYSE is part of the Wired community that we're building, an open source community. It's open to everyone. Come join us. Thanks for watching.